So I think what I'll do, if this makes sense with everyone, I'll start. I'm going to post a link in the chat here to our documentation for Fieldbook. We have a section in the documentation linking to our training presentation, which I've updated to cover the version 6 updates and include some information on connecting to databases like BIMS. And while I work through that, I'll also pull up my emulator and we'll walk through some of this live. You can follow along in that presentation or use it at any point in the future that you want to come back to it. So let's go ahead and share our screen here. And yeah, I'll have to do the whole thing if we want the emulator. Okay. And let's see if we can get this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, can everyone see my screen? And hear me, hopefully?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, great. Okay, so just to start out, I'm gonna see if I can go through kind of the basics fairly quickly, since it sounds like a lot of you are already familiar, and focus on the V6 updates. And then in the second half here, we'll get to connecting to BIMS and making a lot of the processes that we look at that involve files more automatic. Just to give you a quick outline, this is what the standard presentation covers, introduction, setup, how to use Fieldbook before getting into advanced topics like using BrAPI. And we have some basic information on what Fieldbook is, what you use it for. It sounds like most of you guys are already familiar with this. So I will go ahead and I can give you a little additional background if you don't know where Fieldbook has come from. It's been around over 10 years now. Trevor Reif, my PI at the lab at Clemson, he started development of Fieldbook back during his PhD in 2012. And so it's come a long way. Ksenia's mentioned she's been there from the start as well and helped guide us. But and yeah, it's quite a big team. So some of the core developers are based at Clemson, but we have many contributors from around the world who add code and translation services. Some of the reasons to use it, it's pretty quick to pick up, and it gives you a lot of useful plot context while you're in the field, makes it simple to enter values for different format traits, as well as take and link photos automatically to your plots. It enforces rules on that input so that you can't accidentally enter characters instead of numbers when it's a numeric trait, or categories that don't exist in categorical traits. And it prevents you from having to transcribe written data because it'll export your collected data as a spreadsheet for you. All of that helps really reduce the risk of accidental mistakes or errors. If you don't have it, it's easy to get as long as you have an Android device. You just go to the Google Play Store. Google Play has the latest stable version, which right now is version 6. If you want to keep up to date with the very latest bleeding edge version, maybe a bug fix that was just pushed in the last day, you can go to our GitHub repository and download the latest from there. And actually now on the About screen within Fieldbook, there's an automatic link that will check to see if there's an updated version on GitHub and help you download it if there is. So any Android device should work as long as it's relatively new. Last 10 years or so should be good enough. If you aren't sure what device to get, if you're getting new devices, we do usually recommend a smartphone over tablets because they're lighter weight, tend to have better cameras, and tend to have SIM card slots, so you can get a SIM card and get access data in the field. Another tool that we've just started using the last year or so that we found quite useful are these Books Palma e-ink devices. They have a few limitations. They don't have a SIM card slot, but their e-ink screen makes them very, very visible in sunlight in the field, and they have quite a long battery life. Okay, here's the first thing that's changed a little bit in version 6. During the installation process, there are a few housekeeping things you have to do. One is to define a storage location. So that's where Fieldbook will write files on your device. And you'll also have to accept or allow permissions for Fieldbook to access the camera or your location data while the app is open. We also recommend, if you haven't used the app before, to load sample data and even potentially the tutorial. Those are all options. Also, I didn't mention, if there are any questions, feel free to jump in and ask them at any point. We can make this quite interactive. I think that'll be helpful way to approach it. Just a little look at what the storage location process looks like. You can choose an existing folder, or using your device's file manager, you can create a new folder. Often you just call it Fieldbook. Allow Fieldbook to access that, and it will populate that folder with all of these subfolders that Fieldbook uses to manage data. This is a bunch of information that you generally don't need to know all the details right away, but some key bits to highlight. Anytime you export data from Fieldbook or from a field in Fieldbook, it'll go to this field export folder. And anytime that you export traits, they'll be stored in this trait folder in a .trt file. One last bit of setup that I highly recommend when you're first starting to use the app is to go to Settings, Profile, and set your name so that the app knows who's actively collecting the data. When this is set, anytime you record an observation, your name gets stored with it. And then anytime you export it, for example, to BIMS, that gets transferred as well, which can be very helpful for quality control and just knowing what's going on. All right, so just to show what that looks like, let's see if we can pull our emulator up here. Usually, let's see if we can overlay it on the slideshow. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's take a look what that actually looks like on device. So here's our workflow here. Permissions, these are required permissions, although you can decide how limited you make them. For location, audio, and then for storage, you can create a new folder, or I already have one here from a previous install, so I'll just say go ahead and use this one. And then the last step is our options here. I'll go ahead and load the sample data. All right, so that's the initial setup. Let's take a look at some of the next steps. So next question is, how do you get your fields onto the device? There are a few different ways, but the first thing you need to do is actually have a field designed. This is one of our example fields, actually our training fields that we use for trainings, kind of illustrating what's necessary in a file. You basically, Fieldbook can accept either CSV or Excel spreadsheets. So you'll want to pick one of the either, or design your trial in a database like BIMS and have it create a file for you, or use BrAPI. We'll see that later. But the key here is that your file has to contain a unique identifier. That's this column highlighted in red here. That is unique for each entry or plot or row in this file. And then generally you want at least two, usually more additional attributes in columns of the file. So spatial information like row and column, design info like the rep or the block. Often it's useful to have your within field unique plot number, or sorting information like a serpentine number, as well as information on what's actually in the plot. So your germplasm and pedigree. Some important things to note is that while you can resort your file within Fieldbook, when you load it, the default sort order of your entries or your plots is the same as the file. So it's usually good to have the file pre-sorted the way you want to navigate the field. If you don't, you'll want to make sure that you have a attribute in your file that you can resort the field by, like a serpentine number, in order to change the order to a different order that you want. And the way you do that is within the field page. We can take a look at that in a moment. The other important thing is that when you are picking out and identifying, which column of your file is your unique identifier, you'll also be asked to choose a primary and secondary identifier. Although one note is that this is going to change in version 6.1, where these options will be changeable at any time, not just on import. What those are for, those show up in between your navigation arrows on the collect screen. So they're basically additional contextual information. They don't actually affect the sort order of the field. Often it's a good idea to use plot because of a setting called the quick go to, which will let you edit the plot number and jump to a specific plot. Okay, so this is just a somewhat antiquated example of how you can get your field designs onto a device. Maybe you use a cable and transfer it, in which case there'll be some device specific choices in order to get those files transferred. Once they're on the device, if you put them in that field import folder, then you'll go ahead and access them via this local storage option. If you don't, if they're somewhere else on the device, you can use the cloud storage option. That'll open up your file manager and you can pick a file from anywhere. So let's take a look at that process. So we'll go to fields. These are the sample fields that were loaded when I first set the app up, but let's go ahead and use this green arrow down here to pull in a new file. I'll go ahead and go to local storage. This is showing me the files that are in that field import folder, and I can pick, I'll load our training sample here. And like we saw, we have our 3 options of identifiers. Plot ID I know is the unique ID. And these choices seem reasonable as well. It'll be useful to see the row and the plot number on the collect screen. So I'll import like that. And there's our new file. If I had chosen instead cloud storage, then I'll also now see a choice of files, but actually it'll take me directly to my storage location, which includes the field import folder if I want to look at those same CSV files, or I can open from anywhere on the device, including, say, Google Drive. So this is, in reality, what I usually use. Okay. Yeah, why don't we load another field here? So here's another example field. We can load it with some random choices, and this will be a good example. This came from an Excel file. That's why we get a different source icon here. And say I didn't actually want this field. I can start doing some field management. and select by long pressing and delete. I'll get a confirmation message to I want to delete. Yes, no longer need that. Okay. Got a little bit ahead there, so let's catch up in the presentation here. So we imported fields. I just showed you some of the management, so you can long press on a field for any batch operations. We did a delete. You could also select one or more fields that way to export. You can also use the toolbar icons to sort your list of fields, or if you have location turned on and your fields have a location attached to them, you can use the symbol to jump automatically and to set the nearest field as active. Speaking of active, I just deleted a field that was the active field, so I currently have no active field. You can activate a field by pressing on the icon as well. The active field meaning the field that will show up when you go to the collect screen. And then finally, this is a new feature in Fieldbook version 6. You can short press on a field item to open the field detail view. Okay, so the field detail view is a page for showing some additional information, some metadata about the field, for example, where it was imported from, how many plots or entries it has, and how many attributes or information columns came with it. You'll also have access to some utilities like the ability to rename the field or to resort the entries or plots within the field. There's some shortcuts to jump directly to collect or export from the field detail page. And in future versions of Fieldbook, the plan is to transition to this model so that all collect and export happens coming from the field page. And then finally, you have a summary section showing what information's already been collected on the field. So in the example here, there's no data, 0 traits, 0 observations. But in our screenshot here, you can see if you collected a set of numeric data, you might see a histogram, for example, of the distribution. All right. Any questions so far? Can you guess? Let's see. I'm gonna continue here, but yeah, feel free to jump in if there are any questions with what we're seeing. And I'm gonna go ahead. We'll skip the exercise here since we're following along with the emulator. But let's go ahead and look at changes to the traits in version 6. All right, so with traits, one of the main changes is the 2-step creation. So now, if we, lost my emulator here, a moment. So if we head over back to our main screen and then go to traits, these are all the sample traits that are loaded when you load sample data, but we can create new traits same way as with fields by pressing this green plus here. The creation process is now 2 steps. So first you pick your trait layout. And then you fill in some of the additional details. One important change is that with a couple of these layouts, they're nested. So if you click on photo here, we now support a few different types of camera input. The traditional system camera, but also a connected USB camera, GoPro, or Canon. All right. And another thing to point out here is that
Sorry, Brian.
yes.
Can you go back the photo?
Uh-huh.
Is GoPro is a video feed or picture? Is it?
Uh, for our purposes in
Uh-huh.
Fieldbook, it's taking pictures.
Oh,
Although, yeah,
picture.
GoPros are often used for video too.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hi,
No
Brian.
problem.
Just a follow-up question. Like for the Canon, like you only support certain models or anything?
Unfortunately, I'm not the best person to answer that question. So another developer, Cheney, has been working on that, and I know it's still beta. Um, so I'm not. I can reach out to him, or you're welcome to, and see what model he's using. But I doubt he's tested beyond um, a single model.
Okay, so like that Canon like camera will connect to Fieldbook via like Bluetooth or USB.
I believe it's wireless connection. Yeah, similar. I know GoPro's Bluetooth. I think Canon is using similar tech.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I also have a question. I noticed that now in the newest version, when you go to take the picture, it immediately shows the window of what the camera sees.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
previously you would have to click and say, okay, yes, take the picture. And then the whole screen of the camera of the gadget you're using would show, and then you position it. Somehow I'm used to the old fashioned, maybe I just needs the time for me to use, adjust to it. And so, and when I want to see the older picture, if there's some other picture I took already and I want to go backwards, when I click on it to make it across the whole screen, sometimes it doesn't do it. So I don't know if those are the glitches, or how does basically
Uh,
how should it behave?
yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
So you're right. The default has changed now. Rather than just having a single button that opens the device camera, you get a preview by default, so that it's a faster process to simply point at what you want, click the shutter, and take a photo. Um, However, if you see the settings button, that is configurable now. So I
Okay.
believe in the settings you can revert to the old uh, behavior if you want. So my emulator here is a little slow at pretending to take photos, but there's oh no, slow and maybe crashing. But there was an example of a virtual room photo.
Yeah.
Go ahead
Okay.
and restart this here.
Okay, I did not
Yeah.
understand what the setting button was for, so I never pressed it. Now because I'm playing around with the books as you're showing things to just
Oh,
figure
nice.
out.
Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. So you can change the resolution, and yeah, I believe you can revert to the previous behavior with the camera.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and restart my emulator here. And in the meantime, we can keep going unless there are other questions. But yeah, those are the main updates for traits. There's also an improved sort. So the same symbol in the toolbar will let you sort your traits by name, visibility, format, and possibly import order as well.
Okay, one note that I did not talk to Trevor. I want to thank you guys for making it accessing the traits that you switch off from the collection view. I don't know if you notice it, but if I touch the traits, it displays the traits that are active and also the ones that are not active. Because
Yeah,
maybe I
yeah.
forgot to activate it, and so that's a neat feature.
Glad to hear it. Yeah. we're slowly getting to some of the quality of life requests as well. Yeah, and there are also some cool features with traits in collect. I'm sure you've seen the new trait progress information with the circles. You can take a look at in a second here. Let's see. All right, we'll skip the exercise. And yes, we'll go straight to collect. So the updated collect screen, a lot of things are similar. The toolbar will look more or less the same with the default tools enabled, searching for specific entries via their attributes. The resource icon to open images from the resource folder. One small change is if you long press the resource folder, it will automatically open the last thing you open to save a click if you're doing that frequently. Summary displays all info for the current entry, and lock freezes, unfreezes entry of new information. All right, the info bars, that's the section right below. Those give you information about the current plot. Those are configurable in multiple ways, so you can change the number that appear on the screen, and you can change the content of what they display. You do that by pressing right on the name. Let's go ahead and do that right now.
I have a quick question about the resources folder. How do you link it to a trait, I guess? Isn't that what it's for? Is to kind of...
Yeah. Usually like a reference image for a scale, for example. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and enable some different traits other than photo here. But yeah, there isn't currently a way to link specific files to specific traits. Rather, you load a handful of files that you might use for a few different traits. And then if you're collecting all those traits at the same time, then you've got to swap back and forth. So that would look something like this. Well, right, my resources folder appears empty. That's a bug that I think is being fixed here because there is one sample resource file. But yeah, so normally if you need to access more than one, you just click on the icon, then pick the specific image you want to reference. If you're using the same image over and over, you can avoid the 2 clicks by long pressing to jump to a specific file that you've been opening a lot.
Brian, what
That's the idea.
what kind of file you can associate it with the trait? The image of the trait.
Yeah. So all the examples are images that I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's just look on the file system here.
Saying it's specifically useful when you're using the like UPOV standard phenotyping, when they have a picture of the shape of something, and then you're asking somebody to take the data for you that don't know what it is, then you can load that picture there. Now Brian is there, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So these are the wheat examples that Trevor has loaded. But yeah. Usually a scale that you can reference.
Each trait can have a one image or multiple.
So right now it's a free-for-all, right? You can put whatever files you want in the resource folder, and you can pull up any file from the folder on the collect screen. There's no current way that you link. I mean, in the name of the file, for example, that'd be a good way to specify.
Oh,
the
I
trait.
see.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's that resource file here. We were going to talk about the info bars. So here are my default 3 info bars. If, for example, I want to see something different, I just click on the info bar title. it was showing me field name, but maybe I want the top one to show me plot ID, which would then let me change the second one to say seed name. Maybe I also want to see pedigree. Yeah. Oh, wait. There we go. Yeah, there's a pedigree that's distinct from the seed name. So that's an example of configuring your info bars. The other thing you can do, this is just looking at attributes that were pulled in with the import file. If you already have trait data collected and it's useful to reference the value of one trait while you're collecting another, you can pick out your traits and see their values in the info bars. You can also, with the customize button here, jump to the setting where you can change the number of info bars. So I might want to say display an extra info bar so I can see a little bit more information. Or maybe I want more screen real estate for other things, and I could reduce down to one info bar or none. All right. So next up, trait navigation. That's these green arrows. Your trait names will show up in between them, along with the description that you entered. Often that's useful for units, like you see here. And then finally, there'll be a series of dots for showing your progress through the traits for the current entry. The dots will be empty when there's no data taken yet, and then they'll fill up as you collect data. And the current trait that you're on will be highlighted in green here. So if I collect plant number and then skip ahead, maybe this is wrinkled. This is showing me I'm on my third of 5 traits. I've collected data for the first 2, still need data for the remainder. You can also, if you don't want to arrow through, you can click on the trait name and skip directly to one of the other traits in your active trait list. Okay. And that brings us to entry navigation. That's the next section below. Same idea, black arrows take you through your entries in the field. As you go, they'll display the primary and secondary identifier values in between them. And the progress bar above them will show how far you are along in the number of total entries for the field. So something like this. One thing that I find very helpful is enabling a quick go-to, which will make these fields editable and let you, for example, type in a plot number to jump to a specific plot. But we can take a look at that in a moment here. Right, okay, and so we're just looking at some of the sample trait formats. Here's a more comprehensive list, although even this is outdated now because there are quite a few photo traits, and I believe this is missing a couple others as well. But highly customizable for what you're collecting. All right, and speaking of those couple of settings that I highly suggest enabling, let's go ahead and do that. One was the quick go-to, the other is this data grid setting. So we'll go to settings. Settings is organized into a bunch of categories. If you're not sure where the thing you're looking for is, you can use the search. So I'm looking for data grid, and we're getting quite a few matches here. And I'm not seeing data grid. That's weird. Well, I know it's in features. So worst case scenario, you can click through. The names are generally logical. So features lets you turn on tools in the collect screen. So we'll enable data grid, and the other thing we'll do, we'll skip down to appearance and enable quick go-to. So what that does, if we go back to the collect screen, is give us a couple more ways of changing entries. So this field is 200 entries. If I'm on plot 12 and I want to get to plot 112, it's going to be real slow to click through. It goes a little faster if I hold it down, but not a ton faster. So with quick go to on, this is now editable. So I said 112, right? I can go ahead and type that in, hit enter, and I can see both from the plot ID and from my progress bar that I've skipped ahead to this specific plot. Another option, I now have the data grid in the toolbar here. I can click on that and it will pull up a grid showing my plots as rows and my traits as columns. And any data that's already been collected will show up in the cells. So if I know I want to jump to a specific plot and trait.
Brian, is there any way you can see the leftmost column? Because everything plot ID.
Yeah,
That's
it's a little funny here. So
mhm.
it's a good question. Sometimes the values that are your row headers are cut off or they're not useful for telling what's what. So in the upper right-hand corner here, you can choose your row headers and shift. Right now it's saying plot ID. I'm gonna pick plot, but I've noticed there's a bug in version 6 that I think is getting a fix released here soon where it's showing the category name rather than the value. So I switched to plot, but it's still not giving me the number. In any case, the idea here is that as you look at your grid, imagine this is a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can say, all right, I see plot 5. I missed a value, right? I collected data for everything but Rust score. So if I go ahead and click on that specific cell,
Okay.
it takes me back to plot 5 to collect Rust score. And yeah, can do that. And then we'll be good to go. So those are two features I highly recommend turning on. That's data grid and quick go to. I noted this earlier though, in version 6.1, quick go to I think will be enabled by default, or a version of it. The primary secondary ID behavior will change a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and keep moving here.
There was a question, Brian, if that was a recent bug because it was working last week.
I think it is, yeah. It's confusing because I saw it and then it was fixed and now I'm seeing it again. And I think it's because I've jumped forward to a fixed version and then when I reinstalled the Play Store version, or maybe it's the latest GitHub version, I'm seeing it again. But yeah, you may not all see that right now, and in the coming weeks, you shouldn't see it, period, with the fix being released. Okay, right, so we took a look at some of our favorite collect features. Here's a training exercise to collect sample data if you want to practice. And finally, let's look at what you do once you have data collected. So the export process is pretty simple. You can access it either from the field detail page, or you can try to export multiple fields at once from the field screen, or as we're seeing on the main screen, there's an export option right here. You have a few choices to make. You have to choose database or table format or both, as well as whether you want to export your collected data just with your unique identifier or with all the columns you imported. And if you want to export columns only for traits that are currently active or for all traits. And finally, if you've collected photos or audio files, you have the option to bundle those in with your export file. If you choose that, it'll create a zip file containing your spreadsheet of exported data and all those files.
Okay, so before you move, one warning that if you wanna manually upload the file to BIMS, you need all imported columns, because then it gives you the unique identifier, primary and secondary order. And that's required. And if you don't have that, because I did only unique identifier, I thought I don't need a repeat of information. But then when I wanted to upload manually, I had to find that information, and that was hell. So just a quick, if anybody is not thinking of using BrAPI or whatever.
Good info there. Yeah, that's definitely worth avoiding that headache and picking all imported columns then. And there's really not much downside to all imported columns because it includes everything. All right. So here's what those formats look like. The distinction is that table gives you one row in the spreadsheet per plot, and then every observation you make for a trait goes in a column. So, you know, you collect 3 observations on a plot, there are 3 columns, fitting all that data into one row for your plot. Database, by necessity, is like a long format. That's because it includes a bunch of metadata for each observation, the timestamp, the collector. If you have location turned on, it will also include location and number. If you have repeated measures turned on, it'll record, you know, if this is the first measurement of this trait and plot, second, third, etc. And generally, if you're working with a database, you want to use this database format because all of this information here is valuable and there's no extra cost to including it. It does, you know, if you're opening up your file to look at it briefly, it's a little easier to make sense of the table format sometimes. So worst case scenario, you can export both. Okay, and here's an example of what that would look like with the training field. A couple things to note are that if you're taking pictures and you don't bundle your data, or even if you do bundle your data, the only thing that goes in the spreadsheet is the path to the file. The file itself obviously can't go in the spreadsheet. And another thing is that if you have repeated measures turned on and you're using the table format, it can only show the most recent measurement. So that's another advantage of the database format is you want to use that if you're doing repeated measures or use BrAPI.
Brian, sorry, like
Mhm.
a question about like, maybe this might be a question for Ksenia or Tin. So if we want to like directly connect to BIMS with BrAPI, and so my students have been like trying that, and then the tables in Excel works fine, but the picture somehow like she encounters some difficulties. Could you like share some experience like how the pictures are loaded to BIMS through BrAPI?
Yeah, that's probably, so I know it's possible if as long as the trait is imported from BIMS or your BrAPI database with the photo format, then Fieldbook will attempt to export it as a photo. And we'll get to some examples of working with BIMS later here, but Tane, do you know, is that actively implemented right now on BIMS end? Or?
I think so.
Yeah.
It should be working. BIMS can grab the image picture from Fieldbook to the BIMS. So right now you are talking about exporting data to the local, not
Right. Yeah.
the
This is an example of what the file looks like if you're doing local files. But yeah, we're about to get to the next step, which is transitioning to using BrAPI and connecting directly to BIMS.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good questions. All right, so we've covered all the basic functionality here. The last couple things that remain are settings, and you'll notice in version 6 there's a new section here, statistics. I'll show that very briefly right now. It's not the most interesting in a new install because not much data has been collected so far. But the stats section here is a place to let you see the big picture of your activity over months and years in many fields in theory. So it's organized into tabs. The first one will show totals across the entire app, how many fields you've collected data for, how many entries, aka plots, how many observations, how much time, et cetera, et cetera. Most here is what plot, most data for a single entry. And then, yeah, you can split it down by year or month, or you can take a look at a calendar view showing you days you've been active on. For me right now, it's just today. And that can either be either the date of the day, February 19th, or you can hit this number and see the number of observations you've made per day. So I've made 5 today. So that's kind of a nice way to introspect on your activity if you're using Fieldbook a good amount. And you can even go ahead and share this information if you want to brag about how much work you've been doing. Trevor is really excited about that. Okay. But okay, and then finally settings. We've reorganized settings a bit since the previous version and added some more things. A lot of it will be familiar. Profile is more or less the same. Appearance is more or less the same. You can go in here and change the language or theme, okay, the coloring if you need to. Lots of choices in behavior to modify how collect screen works. And a couple, even this one, for example, modifies how the date trait works. And one thing that I think is actually kind of nice, the swap navigation here is set up to change your arrow configuration on the collect screen. So for example, if you're clicking through many traits per plot and then entering data here, it can be nicer to have your trait arrows close to the entry rather than your entry arrows, if that makes sense. That's just a little minor change in the behavior on the collect screen. All right, and last but not least, BrAPI. That's what we're going to be looking at here shortly. I'm going to go ahead and skip to that here. If you can always come back to this presentation or the docs themselves if you want to learn some more about different features. Here are some of the external devices that work with some of the traits. And geonavigation, which has been exciting to develop, but that requires quite a bit of extra hardware. And yeah, last but not least, BrAPI. All right, so what we've talked about so far, the kind of existing model or default model has been working with files, right? If you're using a database, it can help you with generating those files, but then you still have to do the transfer manually, right? By putting it in the right folder or finding it on the device, then exporting files and uploading files. The future, the new model, is to use BrAPI. That stands for the Breeding API. And the idea here is no more files. Fieldbook app uses web protocol to talk directly to BIMS and request available field layouts and traits, and then export or push collected observations. Here's an example of what your export screen might look like. It can be pretty smart in that it can it can do diffs and tell, for example, if you've collected a bunch of data, how much has already been sent before, already synced with your BIMS database, and how many are new and still need to be sent. Why might you want to do that? Well, some of it should be self-evident, right? It simplifies things. No more file transfer. Makes it faster because that takes time as well. If you've ever had problems where you import a file and you get errors saying, oh, you know, your unique IDs aren't unique, or X, Y, or Z column heading isn't right, it gets rid of all of that hassle. It can automatically transfer a lot of that extra metadata that can be useful, the collecting person and the timestamp. And something really cool is that it can seamlessly merge data from multiple devices. So if there's more than one person working in a field, or you're working on different days and you want to keep your different devices up to date with each other and with the database, it can handle all of that. And of course, if you're doing that immediately, then everyone else gets access to that data sooner, and it's getting linked through your database and all the relations stored in it to the rest of your breeding data. Speaking of this process, you might wonder what really is BrAPI. What does application programming interface mean? It's basically a set of standards for what breeding data constitutes, right? What fields, what refers to what fields are required for different data types. It lays out a schema. This is an example of the major categories in the BrAPI core part of the API. And it makes sure that tools that implement it all speak that same standard and therefore can programmatically transfer their data. RESTful here means that it's just using standard web protocol requests to make all this happen. So a GET request to retrieve data, or a POST request to put new data, or a PUT request to update existing data. No delete yet. So if you need to delete data, BrAPI won't do that for you, at least not yet. Okay, so how do you use it between Fieldbook and BIMS? You start by going, like we were just looking at, to Settings, BrAPI, and Enabling BrAPI. When you do that, you'll see a bunch of BrAPI specific settings pop up. Don't freak out, since there are a lot of them and they seem a little cryptic in their names. You don't have to set that by hand. BIMS and Fieldbook can handle that using auto configuring with the QR code. Or even if you want to do it manually, you only have to manually set a couple settings, which we can show you right now. So here's what the auto configuring would look like. You would go to BIMS, and actually, let's see if we can actually do this using the virtual environment here on our emulator. So I'm enabling BrAPI here. Right now, by default, it is connected to the test BrAPI server. That's just an open BrAPI server that has a handful of really small trials, just so you can play around with how the import works if you want. If you want to connect to a specific database and do it automatically, you can click this scan symbol up here. And then you can choose to import new settings. Or if you want to share what you have with someone else, you can share your own current settings. When you do that, it'll open up the barcode scan, and yeah, I don't actually think I have a good way to access the auto configure in my emulator here. Sometimes you can put a QR code on the fake TV screen there and scan it, but it looks like it didn't get pulled in. So I will do the manual way, but just to show you guys briefly what the the non-manual way looks like. Here's a view here. So within BIMS, there's a section labeled Fieldbook Management with some nicely detailed instructions for how to use BrAPI here. And you'll see this auto configure QR code is what you can use with that feature there to auto set everything. Okay, but if I'm doing it manually, then I will go here and edit my base URL. To a not misspelled URL. And I'm just going to hit authorize here to save this, but I know I have to change one other setting here before it will work for me, because the ODIC URL is the other one. Now, of course, authorize will do this automatically for you. Okay, or auto configure will do that automatically. All right, so now that I have my settings, I'm going to hit authorize. And Fieldbook should take me to my login. So I can log in here and tell the database that I want Fieldbook to be able to access. My data. Oh, I can remember my password. Right. There we go. Okay. So I'm in, and I will say yes, authorize this request. Okay. So what do we do from here? We're connected to our database. Now, all of those features that we discussed before that require files, we can use BrAPI instead. So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those are. Oh, so I'll skip back here. So we're configured. Aha, here we go. Okay, so first off, import fields. Now that we have BrAPI enabled, if we go to fields and we go to add a new field, we'll see our BrAPI server name show up as an option at the bottom. If we click that, BrAPI will query our database and pull in all the possible fields that we have access to that aren't already in Fieldbook. The first time it does that, it will take a little while because that query takes some time. However, after that's done once, it will cache the results, and subsequent loads of this screen here will be quite fast. However, if you then create a new field in the database, you'll want to use the cache update option to update.
Brian, sorry, can you go back to trait?
To
before
traits.
before you import any field from the BIMS.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because right now you have a trait that's for the local. So is it a good idea to delete this first?
So
And
there's
I don't
no, yeah. Fieldbook, generally speaking, won't care, right? It'll just add new traits to this
so
list.
it's going to be added to this list.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a slight bug I've noticed, though. So if a trait name from your existing list exactly matches
Then
a trait you're trying to import from BrAPI, it won't show up as an option. Yeah, BrAPI is checking your existing trait list and only showing options that don't exist by name. Yeah, so I think we have to update that to check by ID. But other than that, yeah, there's no need to remove these other than, if I'm not using them, they're just getting in my way. So might as well select them and delete them. But yeah, you don't have to do that. I'll go ahead and do that just so this will be a little more clear. Okay, so I've got my trace deleted. fields is fine, right? I don't need to get rid of my current fields, but I will go ahead and go to new field. I'm seeing my BIMS database show up as an option here, and I'll hit field import. And I guess my account only has access to a couple fields, so it's nice and fast. And yeah, so these are my two options here. Depending on how much data is being transferred, you might, actually, I think this is just showing the trial that the study is in. But let's see, I'm going to go ahead. You can select one or more. However, Tane mentioned that if you try to import hundreds at a time, the app may crash. So be a little bit conservative in how many fields you import at once, because as you hit import here, it's saving their layouts in memory until you've actually fully saved the field. All right, so the second step of the study import, once you've selected one or more studies to pull in, is to select your choices of level, primary, secondary, and sort. I'm not actually seeing a level option here. Sometimes a field will have what are called multiple levels of observation units. So you might have a plot level, but then also have identifiers for plants within the plot, in which case you need to make sure you choose the correct level for what you want to collect data for. Primary and secondary, right, that's what we see in between the arrows on the collect screen. I generally like to see some layout information like row and column, or if there is a...
Brian, I have a question for this.
Yes.
So when we prepare the field book, the field design on BIMS, so the field book app can only read the field data, name, the primary, the secondary, and the observation unit ID. And I think Chandrika and Manjunath wants to add the location information or the site information. And you have other attributes there that actually left blank when we imported the field design into Fieldbook app.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I wonder how, yeah. I think it's also a question to Tain and Suk, how Fieldbook app reads the BIMS template. Yeah.
And if I can add to that, thank you, Ron, for mentioning that is my issue. So when we set up the field book the file in BIMS, you can choose whatever you want for unique ID, primary and secondary. But when it's pulled with BrAPI to the field book, row is primary, column is secondary, observation unit name is unique ID, and germplasm is accession. So I had to like write on the paper so I understand what is what, and I would love if we can keep whatever the name I choose for primary and secondary in the field book, because that used to be when you manually upload the file, whatever you name the columns, that's what it is in the field book. Because it's really hard to sort and figure out what it is when it changes the name, when it gets pulled into the field book via BrAPI.
Gotcha. Let's finish importing this study. Tane, yeah, jump in if you have more to add.
No, I understand its primary order is column, right? In the field book.
So it's
row.
Configurable, right? By default,
okay.
it looks like it's picking
and secondary
row
is a column,
column.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. But Ksenia saying is she used primary as a R.
Yes, as
and
a row, I use
secondary
just R.
is a T.
T as a tree.
Right. So she wanna see R and T in this selection. That's what you...
Yes,
think?
exactly.
Okay, but
thank you, Tane. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because I
Okay,
don't know
that's
what
helpful,
column is, and I don't know what row is. I don't use plot, so plot is a wasted option for me, you know.
I see.
And
Yeah,
then I need to actually go into the file to figure out what's what.
Okay.
And that's how I know now, but I did not before.
He kind of
You-
request if you can change the name to be, well, I don't know. I had to send the information that too.
So yeah,
Mm,
right now what we're seeing is the BrAPI standard, right?
Right,
So
right. Yeah,
Ksenia
we have to
doesn't
follow
want to speak
that.
the BrAPI
So
standard, yeah.
yeah.
Which is okay. But yeah, I think on BIM's end, there wouldn't be a good way to modify this, right? They have to follow the BrAPI format to import this database or this data. But
Mm.
in theory, on Fieldbook's end, that could be a setting where you maybe in an additional BrAPI setting where you have aliases
Change. Yeah.
for
Mm.
the BrAPI standard for what you prefer.
Right.
Yeah. For right now, yeah, we'll imagine our row is R, and you said column would normally be tree for you, Ksenia,
Yes.
or secretary.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see, and I will not change the default sort. So let's go ahead and save. And yeah, I do see the location isn't showing up there, but that I assume that's because it wasn't getting pulled in, but could. All right, so here's our new field here. We can see where it came from. We can see that it's a pretty small 9 plots, 8 attributes that came in with it.
Okay. What is rename doing? The renaming.
Yeah, good question. So if for some reason, for example, we don't like the name that came from the database, or we want to add more explanatory detail.
Well, if you change here, I don't think the change cannot. It's not affecting. Cannot change
Exactly.
in BIMS. So in this field book, you can see it, but this name, I don't know.
You're right. So this is only changing the display name in Fieldbook.
Right.
It doesn't
So
affect anything back.
If you think its name change, I don't know. Well, change.
Yeah, let's see. I guess it says like display name here, but yeah, maybe we can make that more explicit that it's only changing it locally.
That's minus thing. So that's
yeah. All right. So one thing we want to do though, since this is a BrAPI field, we pulled it in from a database. We see that it hasn't come with any data, but we might want to check. We only got the layout, but maybe data has already been collected. So that's what this sync option is that shows up on BrAPI fields.
So
you hit
this
that.
data is in the BIMS. And
Exactly.
Grabbed it. Okay.
Yep. So it's querying BIMS to see if, in addition to the layout, it can grab any data that's already been
Okay, right now here, thank you for showing this, because I was wondering in this first picture from the left to the right, how could you see all of that and I don't when I use BrAPI? Because you ignore the pop-up window where it asks you to select import and saving for, let me do it again, because now I see it when I enabled BrAPI, it immediately, when I logged in authorized, it asks me to say that that's a source and a saving folder. And when you click that, you do not see this. Then it's only BrAPI test save. You don't need local cloud create new.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Okay.
It'll prompt you if you want to make BrAPI default, which personally I generally don't do. And yeah, maybe it's a bad idea normally to do that because you might wonder why the other options are missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna let's pull in the data that's in BIMS so that we don't double collect anything.
Okay, well, one question here. So when you think, if you have an image data, I haven't tested yet, but is it image coming from BIMS too?
I
don't think so.
I don't. You're right. I think it's only getting the.
It doesn't. I can
even
tell you, it
metadata
doesn't.
too.
I think it gets the file path, but yeah, I don't think it's able to pull in the photo itself.
Okay.
Currently. Yeah. Right.
But metadata is coming.
Right. So you can see that there were photos.
Oh, do you have photo? Can you go correct?
It shows the gray box.
Oh, I see.
So it
Okay.
doesn't show the picture because it has
Right.
the metadata, but so you know somebody took the picture, but it
Right.
doesn't show the picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So we have our field layout. We pulled in data that's already been collected on it. Along with that came traits that have already been collected. If we are not satisfied with that existing set of traits, we could look to see if we could pull in more. Although I think this may be all the traits that are in the BIMS instance. We can check, I suppose. So if we wanted to get more BrAPI traits, we would click on the plus, and then the server symbol in the bottom here is how we get our BrAPI traits. And I'll do a search, and yeah, it's seeing no new traits. I think we must have pulled in all 10 that are in that test instance. Just for the sake of showing.
Okay, so Brian, how do you get to the previous picture when you see that one page with like a cartoons of all the traits? Because yes, how do you get to that within the app? Because I see only a list of traits when I go to traits.
Okay, so yeah, if you're on the traits screen, if it says traits in the toolbar, then there should be, it's called a floating action button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. This
There's
is
a
what
plus.
A plus, yeah. So you click on that. That pulls up your list of trait layouts that you can add.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
because I just wanted to ask, how can I switch between the traits that were manually and this, and I now see you doing it and I didn't see it. Okay, thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this would be how you add new traits of any kind, including traits from BrAPI. We just saw that I think we pulled in all of the traits from the BrAPI database, but let's say we hadn't. I'm actually going to see, because we know we only have 6 traits with data: Boolean, photo, categorical, counter, numeric, and percent. So if we wanted to get rid of some traits, like this audio trait we don't have any data for, we can go ahead and delete that. Multicat, I don't think we have any data for. Delete that. So we have a limited set of traits. Oh, maybe I deleted one I actually do want. So I'll go back to my plus. I'll go to my BrAPI server. Oh, it still doesn't. We might have to reset the cache. Let's do that. But yes, that's, if you didn't have traits pulled in already, this is where we would see traits.
Okay, one suggestion, I don't know if that's possible, but if you're having 2 different programs, like say I'm doing rootstock and scion breeding, and those are the different traits, there are different programs in the database. But if I'm pulling the file through BrAPI, it just embeds the new traits within all other traits. So if there is a simple switch, you know, to just uncheck all of the traits that are not associated with the program.
Yeah. We didn't touch trait management too much in version 6, but I know there are some big plans in version 7, next major version, to rework this, similar to how fields have been reworked, right? So to make this
in the BIMS, a trait is associated with the program.
Yeah.
So
gotcha.
If you have 2 different programs, you have 2 set of the trait. So if you can swap whenever you change the field, that's be nice if you can.
Yeah, or if it automatically does it, you know. So if I pull this different program files, it just automatically unchecks the traits that are not associated with that program and checks only those that are, or pulls them in or something.
And
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and that the program concept would apply to fields as well. So yeah.
Okay.
I'll chime in as someone who doesn't use BrAPI. It would be nice to also, like be able to group traits, like so all flowering traits, put in this folder or trait folder or something, so you could kind of like, because we've got like our list is getting like a mile long, but I don't want to delete them because then you got to like re-upload them or remake them or whatever, and it gets like be a pain in the neck. So
That's good to hear. Yeah, I think would be widely useful. And we actually have I was working on a initial version of that where you could set traits on a field basis and then swap traits, basically copy traits from one field to another. It was a little rough around the edges, but I think that's the direction we'll be going: trait groups and or program wide traits switching.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Okay. One thing just to point out, so when traits come in from BrAPI, generally they'll come with a format, but formats aren't really part of the BrAPI standard. So sometimes the format of the trait might not be exactly what you want. You can, if you need, for example, say this T counter trait shouldn't really be a counter, it should be numeric. You could go edit. This brings you to the second parameter screen for the counter. If you hit back, oh, okay. Didn't like that. It's looking a little buggy right now. Okay, well, in other versions, if you go to edit parameters and hit back, it'll take you back to the format chooser. So if the format comes in wrong, you can fix it.
Wait, so you mean you can change the format of the trait on fly? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be problem for BIMS because I don't know.
Actually, you know what? Let's do a quick test here. So BrAPI doesn't track format, right? It enforces other rules on traits. Let's go ahead. Let's make a test for % trait. It's possible actually this is disabled for BrAPI traits, and I'm just thinking of what you can do.
Yeah.
What you can do for yeah, there we go. Okay. You can't do that for BrAPI traits, only for locally added traits. Yeah, okay, I misspoke.
That's nice.
This is interesting because I've seen it has been useful, I think, before this has been disabled. Because some BrAPI databases use format names that Fieldbook doesn't recognize.
Because if you change format, the data is sometimes gone, right? I mean,
no,
if
right?
Numeric data and then change to the photo, then data be inconsistent or something. You have to check the data first.
That's true. That's true, right?
Yeah.
That would be a bad change. But % to numeric or
yeah,
numeric
that's
to %,
okay.
right? Any % is still numeric value. So, but you're right. All right, we're getting in the weeds, but it could be good or bad, and it looks like it is actually only allowed for local traits.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's get to the meat of the process here. So we have, let's make sure we have it active here. We have our BIMS field here. We don't actually need this renamed, so I'm going to switch it back. Not that it really matters. And we have some active traits. Let's go ahead and collect some sample data. And going in here, we can see some of that data we synced is showing up as already having values for this first plot. So I'm going to go through. I still have my setting turned on that's swapped to my arrows. I kind of like it for it this way. Let's get Boolean. Some example text. I'm going to skip photos because the emulator is not good with them. Okay, maybe get some data from one other plot here. One thing to note is you can also use, Tane, I think you asked about this, text traits you can use the dictation feature on Android keyboards to do speech to text if you want. That's one of the advantages of a text trait. Okay, so just a few bits of data collected here, but we can see that show up. Now we've jumped from 25 observations to 32 here. And if I go to export, and I'll choose the BrAPI database here. You could also, even if it's a BrAPI trial and BrAPI traits, you can export to file if you need to. I'll go ahead and do my BrAPI export. It's checking here and it's seeing that I only have 7 new ones. The rest are already synced. 24 of them traits, 1 an image. And I'll save. All right, BrAPI export successful. 31 synced. We did it. All right. And let's see, I got a little bit behind here in the presentation. So we're on the very last bit here. Now, someone else who working on the same field, they could then sync the data that I just sent or vice versa. I can also go to BIMS and take a look at where my exported data has gone. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but I have some slides here from Suk, and so I can attempt to look at this if I pull up BIMS and see my data. And Tane, feel free to let me know if I'm
Okay. That's a program you did? Fieldbook.
Fieldbook BrAPI demo.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you click under the BrAPI section? There's an import observation data. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Today's
This must be it. Yep.
19th, yes, that's it.
And then can you click a view?
Yes.
Okay. So you got. Can you click the new data log?
Yes. New data
Log, the bottom.
right here. Yep.
So there's some, okay, so looks like data is in table. So can you go search?
Let's see. Search.
Yeah.
Point me.
Okay, in the
Left side of the accordion.
I gotcha. Yep.
And then click phenotype. Do you know what data you added?
So yeah, a mix of data, but
okay.
text,
Can you
for
click the
example,
trial? Can you click the trial?
Yep. And
okay. And then can you click the 20 and then can you add it?
Yep.
And then can you view?
Yep.
Okay. And then can you click the column, option and click all the trait?
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry.
Sorry, whoops. Yeah, that was properties.
And then do you have a text tone?
Yeah, I see text here.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because you put something on text. So
yeah, I put some text and I think date, for example. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, can you unclick all the sample property because it's going to be messed up? Okay,
Yep.
and then can you click the update?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
See the text some data you typed, just typed. Okay.
There's the data I typed. There's the data I took. Yep.
So
go.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work for me.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it just tells me error, whatever. And so I was just trying right now from my phone, from the books, and it just doesn't want. It's connected to the GDR, and it just doesn't want to export. It just says that's an error. So I don't know if that's the instrument I'm using or something, but it's just.
You're seeing a error in the fieldbook export saying it doesn't want to export.
Yes. Last summer it worked great, and then the latest one, I basically had to download manually and import manually to BIMS because I needed the data. I never could export it, and I don't know what it is. It works, and then it's like partially it shows like partially imported, exported, stuff like that. So not sure what's happening. I might again send you the books, guys, so you can see it, because I need to set it up for new season, and I just don't.
Okay. Well,
So in cases when something like that happens, it sounds like you're familiar with this.
what version are you
You-
using, Ksenia? 6.06?
Yeah, the newest one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so you see, this is my phone. I mean, if you can see, that's where it sits like frozen, or for pulling the files from the GDR, basically.
Here, I'll stop sharing for a second so I can see.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but the main thing to do if you have an error like that is to export your database, and then you can share it for us to help
Okay.
debug.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
My guess is that, it's probably related to a specific trait or change that BrAPI is not happy with.
I don't know if you see, it says error. Okay, let me try again. And so here is like, it says error.
Yeah, you're gonna
blah,
get
blah,
toast
and
at
it
the bottom.
vanishes. So it's really hard to. It says
Yeah.
unknown error. Please check BrAPI preferences or contact developer, and then it vanishes.
BrAPI preferences, interesting. Yeah. Go ahead and send that database. And if you can get a screenshot of the error, you can try that. That's another issue we've worked on is returning errors, not just in toasts, but in long-lasting dialogues. So you have time to see the whole thing. The nice thing is that if the BrAPI export doesn't work, you can always fall back to the traditional file export, right? It's like escalators. They break, they're still stairs. So you're not totally out of luck, but it would be nice if it was more consistently working. And that's what we're working towards. Okay. I guess, we made it to the end of that set of slides I had prepared. But I can pull up my emulator again and answer more questions if there are any. Otherwise, I think we're also just at the time we had scheduled to finish here. So let me know if there are any other things we should discuss, or we can start to wrap it up. Uh-oh, I also may have gone frozen here. Oh, okay.
I just sent you the picture. I managed to catch it with my phone.
Nice. Okay. Just for anyone else who is watching who isn't familiar with the process here, what Ksenia is doing is you can go to settings, and then it's now in this section called storage, and you can export your database to basically make a complete copy of all the data in your app, which is the most useful for us if we're debugging something. Also really useful for users if you're transferring Fieldbook from one device to another, or you want to make a backup before you try something risky and you don't want to lose your data, because once you've exported your database, you can always re-import it again from the backup.
Oh, now this is the new thing that I it saw my MacBook and only asked me if I want to directly send it via Bluetooth, exported database to my Mac, and now it's doing it.
Right. Yeah. So another setting is configurable here in system. It's on by default, called file sharing. When this is enabled, any file you create, whether it's a data export file or a database file, it'll give you the option to share using apps on your
but
device.
where does it go?
So it always gets stored within the Fieldbook folder, right? The file sharing options it shows you are in addition to writing it within the fieldbook folder. So I can
Okay.
show you
Okay.
what that looks like here.
If I
So
export it, yes.
we
I
saw
see.
that resources was that folder where you could have like reference images. Anytime you export database, it gets stored in this database folder. There are also, there's a sample database here and a routinely backed up database, right? So if anything bad happens and you didn't make a manual backup, often there'll be an automatic backup here you can access.
Oh, that's good, because I need to set it up for the new season, and I didn't want to, because otherwise Michael will have to manually upload the pictures, because I did upload manually the traits, and I'm trying to make it work. So now maybe I'm actually confusing it because it already has the traits in the database. I already did that manually, but I want pictures. And then so now I'm not sure. So we'll survive this year, but now I know what to do when something happens like this.
Yeah, it's definitely useful to